You can be the best communicator on earth, but if you're communicating in the wrong style and they don't comprehend it, then it's useless. Hey, welcome back to the podcast. On this episode, we're going to be talking a little bit more about communication. Now, I've talked in the past about effective communication and effective communication styles, what that looks like. But today I'm going to dive into a different aspect of effective communication, and we're going to talk about comprehension. Because at the end of the day, the only way that effective communication works is if there is comprehension on the other party, right? And so part of not having effective communication is that you're not doing a good job of explaining or communicating to the other person in a manner to which they can comprehend what you're saying. And a lot of that has to deal with learning styles. And we're going to talk about the different types of learning styles so that you can understand that your one way of doing something and communicating may not be reaching all of your employees or your clients or, vendors or whoever you're dealing with. You've probably dealt with certain types of clients where it just always seems like a challenge to communicate with them, or you have certain employees or people in your life, I don't care who it is, where you feel like you're communicating the same way that you communicate with everyone, but a certain type of person or a certain type of character or whatever, they just can't understand. Like you feel like you're always trying to, or always have to over communicate, like what you would consider to be over communicating. I've told you 5 times how to do this. Why don't you get it? And what we're going to talk about is exactly the reason why they may not be getting it. And that's because people learn differently and they communicate differently. And if you don't understand this could be the root problem that you have with your team. So I'm going to be referencing an article that I just found on the internet from the Bay Atlantic University. It's in Washington, D.C. It's just a blog article. And the article is about the 8 types of learning styles. And so we're going to talk about the 4 main ones. And then there's 4 additional ones that aren't as prevalent, but can also be, a factor. So we're going to focus on the 4 main ones, though, for the majority of this. You've probably heard this before, or maybe you understand it, but you didn't know the actual name. And so I'm just going to read the first 4, the main ones that you may have heard or not. But the 4 are, there's a visual learning style, people that can just, watch a YouTube video and then know what to do. I'm a visual learner. There's an auditory learning style. That's people that have to hear things. That's people that love audiobooks. They can hear a book and then implement. There is kinesthetic learning. That's where a lot of contractors are, kinesthetic learners. That means that you have to learn by doing. You learn by touching, feeling, doing. And then you have reading and writing, people that just learn by reading a book or writing things down. Now, there's no hard definitive, you are one of these 4. You can learn through all these different methods, but generally one of these is going to be prevalent. Like one of these is going to be your preferred method of learning. I can do all 4 of these. I'm the weakest at actually reading and writing. That's my weakest. I would rather watch a video on how to do something. I can watch a YouTube video on, some type of, especially if it's a skill, like a trade skill. I could watch a video on, let's say, something I've never done before. I'm trying to think of what that, like say, lay a paver. I've never laid pavers before. I could watch a few videos on how to properly lay pavers and then go out and execute to near perfection of that video, however the video described it. I have that ability to just watch a video and then go execute, almost from memory, how to do that. But I can also learn by just watching you, or doing it. So like if you say, okay, here's what we're going to do, grab a 2x4, or sticking with the paver scenario. Okay, the first thing you're going to do is we're going to go grab a paver. So go grab a paver. And now this is how you, set it. And this is how you level it and beat it down and blah, 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 do your sub base, right? Here's all the steps. And I'm doing it. Like, I can learn that way too, but I would just prefer to watch you do it one time and then I can do it the same way. Maybe you need a little bit of instruction. I'm not going to be an expert at it by any means, but I can comprehend by just watching you do it, okay, without any instruction. Like, I can literally just watch you do it if you had tape over your mouth, and then I can do it the exact same way after one time. Okay, that's my preferred learning style. But I also listen to audiobooks. And yes, I do hear things and I take things away from that. But sometimes I have to listen to a book or a section or chapter multiple times in order to comprehend it, because I'm not as strong at hearing as I am as watching. And then physically doing it, yes, I can do it, and that helps reinforce it. But by far, I would prefer to learn everything through, watching. Now, in my course that I created in the Profit Club and a lot of the trainings that I have, I've had most of it's video. It's me talking, and I like to do short videos, like 5-10 minutes. I don't like to have like an hour-long video of like, this is how you do sales. I break it down and like, this is one aspect of sales. Here's another aspect. Here's another aspect. So I may end up with, 10 or 15 videos instead of a 2-hour video, right? Because I just like to break things, ADD, all that stuff. I like to just break it down into simple to understand sections. And that's a form of communication. That's a form of effective communication. But I had a client one time who was like, Brad, this is great that you have videos, but what would be really great is if you had all of your videos transcribed and then put into like the comments or the section below the video where I could read it. And while I didn't disagree that's a good idea, I thought it was a good idea, he was the only person that was asking for it. And so from a time consuming aspect for me in my coaching business, it just wasn't enough of a demand for me to go and transcribe and spend 40 hours or whatever it was to put these into text, right? But clearly he was a reading, writing, comprehension type of person. He wanted to be able to read it. He can't watch a video and understand it. So this applies 100% to your business. If you have clients that you're like, oh yeah, you're out there looking at their job. Oh yeah, we're gonna have pavers right here, and here's the walkway, and then we're gonna have a pond over here, and some shrubs and landscaping, and blah 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 blah. And here's the fire pit, and they're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I can't see what you're talking about. Can you just do a design for me? Can you put this on paper? Because I have no idea. I can't picture it. I can't see it. And you're like, well, it's right here. It's just right. It's right here, like you're not communicating effectively because their learning style is not one that can learn from your teaching style. Your communication is not effective. It doesn't matter if you've done the exact same thing with 20 other clients and they're like, oh yeah, that's great. I can see it. I can picture it. It makes perfect sense. Right? So then you come across this one who can't see it, they can't picture it, and you think, oh, this person, they're just going to be a difficult customer. It's like, no, they just learn differently. You have to have a different way of teaching them. So if you can, learn these different styles and then ask a few questions to really try to see how it is, how they learn, then you can develop your communication in a way that is effective for them so that they comprehend it. This should be on your onboarding for employees. Like, you should ask the question when you hire someone, what is your preferred way of learning? Do you like to watch stuff? Do you like to read stuff? Do you like to hear stuff? Do you like to do it? It's very simple. What's your preferred method of learning? And so now you know, if they say, well, I really comprehend the most when I read things. Okay, well, all of the stuff we do is OJT. Like, we're just going to teach you how to do it. And if you like to read it, that could be a challenge. So you have to decide to what level that you want to provide the type of training. My suggestion is that as you're developing any type of training, you actually develop all 4 methods. Now, Audio, like you can take a video, you can record a video of you saying, this is how we do this, and then simply just turn it into an audio file. Like that's easy. There's no additional work. You can take your video and then you can transcribe it. Now with AI, they can be done in like 5 seconds. You just plug in your video link and it transcribes the whole thing. You may have to go in and clean up some of the grammar, but now you have a written form of it. And then the last piece is going to be the kinesthetic learning, and that's going to be the OJT, the on-the-job training. So you can easily adopt any type of training that you have to hit the 4 main ones so that they can comprehend, right? So let's dive into these 4 a little bit more, because there's some ways that you can teach, the preferred methods of teaching these types of people. So if we look at visual learning, they don't necessarily respond well to photos or videos, although they can. I'm a visual learner. I can watch videos. It's more along the lines of watching someone do it, like in person, right? So visual learners, they prefer to take in their information visually, be that with maps, graphs, diagrams, charts, and others. However, they don't necessarily respond well to photos or videos, rather needing their information using different visual aids such as patterns and shapes. So that's interesting, because it sounds like they're not, videos don't work. I'm wondering if they are adding that to kinesthetic learning. I didn't read all of this ahead of time, full disclosure, but let's keep going with the visual learners. I'm thinking that there's a little bit of a overlap here. But they say the best way to present to visual learners is by showing them the relationship between different ideas visually. For instance, when explaining a scientific process, it can be done by using a flow chart. So I try to do this with all my content. I try to take all of the things that I teach that may be complex, like you start talking about gross profit margin and net margin and markup and some of these things that can be a little more challenging for people. I like to take that information and then create it in a visual representation, a chart or a graphic or something like that. So that is like me trying to dumb it down. And we didn't get into dumbing it down yet, but I will in a little bit, talking about dumb it down. Sometimes you need it to be an effective communicator. You have to dumb down the information. So in this situation, if I'm trying to explain a complex process, I can use charts and graphs and flow charts and different things like that to dumb it down to make sense. That's what this article is saying. The auditory learning style. I'm just going to read this. Auditory learners are individuals who learn better when they take information in auditory form when it is heard or spoken. They are prone to sorting their ideas after speaking rather than thinking ideas through before, since to them, saying things out loud helps them understand the concept. And we're going to get into some ways of doing this here in a second. But saying things out loud helps them understand the concept. If they are learning a second language or a new theory, auditory learners learn best when information is presented to them via strategies that involve talking, such as lectures and group discussions. They can benefit from repeating the lessons, utilizing technology for recordings or lectures, doing group activities that require classmates to explain ideas, so on and so on. So open discussion about stuff is how they're going to learn. Now, the kinesthetic learning style. Kinesthetic learners are individuals who prefer to learn by doing. They enjoy a hands-on experience. They are usually more in touch with reality and more connected to it, which is why they require using tactile experience to understand something better. So if someone's a kinesthetic learner and you're trying to tell them, hey, just, grab the drill and drill a hole there, you're trying to tell them how to do it, they may have to pick it up and actually do it for the first time themselves in order to understand it, because they have to feel it, right? They have to have a tactile experience. It says the best way to present new information to kinesthetic learner is through personal experience, practice, examples, or simulations. For instance, they can remember an experiment by recreating it themselves. I'm thinking like the thought of like a science experiment. My son, a couple of years ago for school, we made like the volcano, right? You had to build that volcano and pour in I forget what chemicals to have a reaction, and you have a little lava explosion. Like that's an example of an experiment that they can recreate themselves. And then the last one is reading, writing. Reading, writing learners consume information best when it's in words, as we talked about before, whether that's by writing it down or reading it. To them, text is more powerful than any kind of visual auditory representation of an idea. These individuals usually perform very well on written assignments. A lot of times your, quote, book nerds are reading, writing learners because they excel in that classroom environment. There are different ways to get reading, writing, learners to engage and understand a certain lesson. For instance, it would be best to have them describe charts and diagrams by written statements, take written quizzes on the topics, or give them written assignments. This is probably why I always hated word problems. You know, Johnny has 4 apples and he gives 1 apple to Sally. What's the color of a car? Like some of these word questions are absolutely stupid, but I was terrible at word questions. Absolutely. I hated them. I could not comprehend them half the time. It was very difficult for me. And, you know, that explains it. I'm not a written or reading comprehensive learner. That's not how I comprehend things. So there's some other ways, there's some other types. I'm not going to get into them. I'm just going to read them. There's logical, analytical learners. There's social, linguistic learners. There's solitary learners, and there's nature learners. You guys can do some research if you want. The names kind of explain, you know, what it is. But, you know, the logical, analytical, they have to use logic and analytics to think through it. This is why when you have if you have a guy, an employee, and you're trying to explain something to them and they're just like in a blank face staring off and you're like, are you even listening to me? They're probably trying to figure it out logically in their head. They're probably thinking through this logically of how this call goes together. So, you know, it may not be they're slow or they don't know what they're doing or they're not listening to you. They're actually trying to process information. And I had one of my employees had this problem because, and I learned this, like, because I'm a student of learning, I always study people and how they react, and then I adjust to make sure that my teaching can match their learning style. But I had an employee, and I would realize that when we would go do a job and start a new job, I would always give like a 30,000 foot view of what we're doing. Not like, here's the actual specifics. So for example, if we're doing a bathroom model, I would say, okay, here's what we're doing. I'll just make up his name, keep him secret. I'd be like, hey, John, here's what we're doing. So we're going to come in here. We're doing a full gut remodel. We're going to take out the closet and the bathtub, and we're going to basically swap locations. We're going to put the shower, a walk-in shower where the closet is, and the closet, you know, where the bathtub is, blah, 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 whatever. And then we're going to, you know, replace everything, new vanity, new top, new tile, blah, blah, blah. Like a 1 minute, 30,000 foot view of what we're doing. But what I realized is the second I said, okay, we're doing a full gut remodel, their brain heard me say full gut remodel, and instantly they're thinking about, okay, what all do we need to do to gut this place? Do we have to set up plastic? Do we got to get runners? We're going to have to demo out this tub. That's probably going to be a pain. You know, we're going to have to do this and this and this. They just heard the first thing I said, and then their brain just went off into solving that problem, and they didn't hear anything else that I said. Nothing. You know, I would get done and say, okay, well, you know, repeat back to me what we're doing. Well, we're going to do a full remodel here. Well, yeah. I mean, that's pretty obvious, but what are the main things? Well, I didn't catch everything. Right? So I learned not to do that, because they would just latch on to the very first thing I said and not hear anything else. And a lot of your employees are doing this as well. They're not going to say, hold up, boss, I didn't hear anything you just said. They're just going to shake their head, nod their head and be like, yeah, sure, I got it, boss. I'm not going to tell you that I don't know or didn't hear anything you said. I'm just going to nod my head yes, and then try to figure it out after you leave so I don't look like a complete idiot. That's what's going on. And then you leave, and then you come back and they doing something different. You're like, what? I don't understand. I told you everything that we were doing. How did you miss it? Yeah, because they weren't listening, right? That's not a them problem. That's a you problem. That's a communication and comprehension problem that you did not do very well. Hey, just a quick time out from the show. If you're a frustrated contractor who's dealing with low profit margins, stuck working on the tools every day, or doing free estimates for people who are never going to hire you in the first place, I invite you to my private contractor community, the Profit Club, where contractors just like you are adding 2 to 3 times more profit each year without producing any more jobs and finally getting completely off the tools to never do another free estimate again. So if you're ready to increase your profits, stop doing free estimates and get off the tools, then all you have to do is click the link in the show notes to learn more about the Profit Club and see how I can easily 2 to 3 times the cash in your pocket, give you a proven sales process that will convert more jobs with ease and get you off the tools once and for all. And the best part is you can do all of this without having to produce more jobs than you currently are. Click the link to learn more. Now let's get back to the show. This is where too many owners and contractors and business people are like, employees suck. It's like babysitting them and micromanaging them. It's like, no, you just suck at communicating clearly in a way that they comprehend. And as soon as you understand this, the faster you understand this, you can eliminate 90% of the problems in your business because it's a communication problem. Truly, it is a communication problem. So I mentioned earlier about dumbing it down. If you can't take a complex subject and dumb it down so that an 8-year-old, an actual 8-year-old, my son's 8, so that an 8-year-old can understand it, then you're not doing a good job as a leader to communicate. I'll give you a prime example. This was like 3 days ago. I'm leaving the office, and in a matter of like 3 minutes, I had like 3 idiot drivers like almost wreck into me. Like it was just like, what is this one of those situations where like everybody, I don't know, they got their head up their butt, they can't drive. I don't know what they're doing. But they I almost have like 3 accidents in like a 3-minute period because people aren't paying attention. And so I'm talking to my wife and my son at dinner. And they're like, oh man. And my son, he likes stories. He always wants us to tell stories. That's a clue in terms of what type of learning he likes. He always wants stories. But after I got done telling the story, he's like, Dad, can you explain again how the cars were, how they were turning? Because I don't understand. Now he doesn't drive, so why would he understand driving? Like how you're supposed to drive. And so I said, okay. And we have a little dry erase board on the refrigerator. So I said, here, let me show you. And so now I draw, a representation of a road and pulling out of the parking lot and cars coming and not putting on their turn signal and, this and this. And I'm like drawing it now as a diagram and explaining it to him. And he's like, oh, okay. I said, now do you understand? And he goes, yeah, I understand. So like that's an example of an 8-year-old who didn't understand it, me talking through it, hearing it, he didn't understand it. Now he needed to see a diagram of it. And once I just drew a diagram, then he understood it. So that's an example, a perfect example of dumbing it down so an 8-year-old can understand it, literally. Now, some of you are like, well, I don't want to do that. I should just be able to hire people and they just know how to do everything that I can do and they just read my mind. They're basically a clone of me and I don't want to babysit them and micromanage them and tell them everything that they have to do because that's not my job. That's what some of you guys think. If that's you, you need to get out of business immediately. You should not own a business, period, or work for yourself. Because if you have employees and you feel like it's not your responsibility to make sure that you communicate effectively and they can comprehend it, then you are a terrible leader. Because good leadership requires excellent communication. This is what you do as a business owner. It's not the glam and the glitz and all the Ritz and all that crap of like you get to drive Ferraris and just drive around and everything works and you go on 8-month vacations and all that. That's not reality. Okay. All the stuff on Instagram, they lie to you. That's not how it works. Maybe 0.001% of the people have that kind of lifestyle. You might as well just accept the fact that that's not going to be you. Okay. So you have to understand that being a good leader means having great communication. You have to be an excellent communicator. You have to understand if you have 8 employees, you can have, if we're only using the 4 main communication styles, then you have 4 different ways at a minimum that you may need to communicate to your staff of 8. So you may have 3 people that are kinesthetic. You may have 4 people that are visual. You may have 2 people that are auditory, and you may have 1 that's a reader. And you have to know that about them so that when you're explaining and teaching, you have to do it in a manner that they understand. You guys picking up what I'm putting down here? You can't take a square peg and put it in a round hole of communication for all of your employees. Everyone learns differently. Everyone talks differently. So what's the backside of that? Well, if you have let's say you have a logical, analytical person, and they're trying to explain to you why they did a decision, and they're explaining it, using patterns and, well, I saw this pattern here, and it was a herringbone pattern, and I just figured that with that pattern, in order to continue the pattern into the other room, we had to do this, this, and this. And you're like, what do you mean pattern? Like, what's that got to do with anything? All you had to do was just continue the floor into the other room. Why did you change it? Right? You might get frustrated because their style of communicating is based on their style of learning. And if you don't understand that, you can get frustrated as an owner because they're speaking, Latin, and you're trying to speak in English, right? They're speaking a different language. Well, that's because that's how they learn. And the way people learn is how they're going to talk. And so you have to understand this about your team and your clients and everything else. And then on top of that, you can have your different personalities. And then you add in, character traits and all that stuff. There's a whole other couple dynamics that you may not even take into consideration. And that is emotional factors. So if you take someone who learns a different way, and then on top of that, they're in a stressed or duressed, emotional state, that's going to affect the way they learn, even if you're communicating in the style that they like. So you have to actually take that into consideration. There's other things like cognitive factors, right? Like how smart are they? Like they may be a kinesthetic learner, but if they're not as intelligent as you, it may take longer. You may have to slow down, right? You may have to do things a little bit different. So you have to just understand this about people in general. Like your job as a leader is to figure out their learning style. It's to figure out how they comprehend things, because you can be the best communicator on earth, but if you're communicating in the wrong style and they don't comprehend it, then it's useless. So one of the things you can do when you're teaching someone, the best way to teach someone something is to first explain it in an overview of what we're going to do. Here's how we change a tire, right? I'm talking now. You and I are, standing there at a trailer, and I'm telling you, okay, this is how we change a tire. You've never changed a tire before in your life. You're 18 years old. You've never done it. No big deal. I'm saying, okay, here's what we're going to do. The first thing we got to do is we got to jack the trailer up. We got to loosen the lug nuts. We got to take the tire off. We got to remove the spare tire from the trailer. We're going to put the spare tire on. We're going to, hand tighten the lug nuts. We're going to lower the trailer down to get friction. And then we're going to hand tighten the lug nut, then we're going to torque the lug nuts to their final spec or whatever. I'm talking through what we're going to do. Then you can say, does that make sense? Yeah, I guess I understand the general concept. Perfect. Now, I'm going to have you do it so that you can understand. And so then you have them do it. But before you have them do it, you say, now, first thing I want you to tell me what you're going to do. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to loosen the lug nuts. And you go, well, before we do that, you missed a step. What's the step we got to do? Oh, we got to jack the trailer up. Yeah, you got to jack the trailer up. So go do that. Then you have them jack the trailer up, right? Or you could say, let me show you how to jack a trailer up. You get the jack out, you jack the trailer up, showing them how it works. And then you lower it back down and say, okay, now you do it. Now you jack the trailer up, have them do it, and then have them explain to you how it works, right? You see how it's like multi-angle. I'm talking, we're just demonstrating, and then we're also, having them explain it back. Because comprehension, if they can't explain it back to you, then they haven't comprehended it. And so that may seem like, oh my gosh, that's so much work. Yes, the first time, right? But here's what you do. While you're doing this, you got somebody else videotaping you with your phone. And then after it's all said and done, you take that and you upload it and put a QR code. And now the next person can just watch that video, and then you can have them explain it back to you, right? Like now you can hit it from every different angle, because you can get the visual learners, you can get the auditory, you can get the kinesthetic, and then the reading, you can even take that and print it out into a step-by-step, into a reading format on that video. I mean, you could take a video, put it on YouTube, make it private, no one else can see it, and then in the description have a step-by-step guide of how to do it. Put that on a QR code, you stick it on the side of the trailer, and now when you have a new guy, you're like, hey, go scan that, watch the video, read it, and then, then tell me how you're going to do it. Before you do it, come and tell me, come and get me, and then tell me what you're going to do, right? Now it's turned into just a 3-minute ordeal, but the first time you do it, it may take you 20 minutes to set it all up, but you hit it from different angles. You don't just say, Johnny, go over there and change that tire. Well, I've never done it before, boss. Well, all you got to do is jack the trailer up and then swap out the tire. How hard can it be? I don't know. Like, how do like, just figure it out. Okay, I guess. He's over there for an hour and a half, and you're like, where's Johnny at? And you go around the corner, and he's got it all jacked up. Johnny, what the hell you been doing, man? Why is this taking so long? I don't know, boss. I couldn't figure it out, right? And then you just like, oh my gosh, you guys are freaking idiots. No, that's not always the case. You just didn't do a good job of explaining this. Okay, I know it's a silly example, but you can do this, create SOPs. You can have multiple ways of getting the information to them. You can even have like an assessment on there. If you really wanted to, I probably wouldn't do that. It's like going above and beyond, but you could record a video, put step-by-step written out, and then have a little questionnaire, 2 or 3 question at the bottom, just to see if they comprehend it, like a self-assessment. But there's definitely ways that you can communicate to your team. And if you're having trouble with things, one, are you actually effectively communicating? The second part of that is, are they actually comprehending? Because you can be effectively communicating to what you think is effective, but it's not effective if they don't comprehend. Hopefully that makes sense. So dumb it down so an 8-year-old can understand it. Make sure you're communicating in the right learning style of that particular employee, which again, you have to ask them. And that's a simple, one question test on a interview. What's your preferred method of learning? And you could have multiple choice with an example, right? And then, or just ask them, hey, how do you like to learn? Well, I learn a lot by just showing me. If you can just show me one time, I'll pick it up. Perfect. If I got to make a note in my jacket about that person, that's what I do. I make a note. Hey, Billy Bob over here, he likes to learn by watching. Steve over here, he learns by me telling him what to do. And so eventually you'll learn your team, and then you can communicate. And then all of your leadership, project managers, lead guys, anybody who's in a leadership position in your business should also understand this about their team and how to communicate. So that's all I got for this show. Hopefully that was helpful. You can go online and just search for different styles of learning, but the 4 main ones that we talked about are really going to help you if you just learn those 4. It's not hard to really discover this. This isn't like it's going to take you, weeks and months to figure it out. You just simply ask your team. And here's a little takeaway. Just go ask everyone on your team if you have employees, and do it like individually. Don't do it in front of a group. Just go up to your guy one day. He's like, hey, I'm just curious, I never asked you this, but how do you like to learn? What's the way that you like to learn? And you might be shocked by the answer. They may tell you, well, they actually learn best by reading. And you're like, well, why are you working with your hands then? Well, that doesn't mean he can't do that. It just means that he can't learn very well, right? So listen, if you go back and look at your crew and think back through all the different scenarios, you will see the flags. You will see the clues of like, oh, you know what? It makes perfect sense now why Johnny's always asking for the blueprints. You know, why he's always asking for the checklists and stuff of things written down. He wants to see all the specs and everything. It's because he learns by reading. You know, oh, it makes sense why so-and-so always wants me to demonstrate and show him one time. Like, you can go back and see the clues. If you actually go back and look, you'll see the clues and it'll be like, oh, no crap. Like, yeah, it makes perfect sense now. So if you haven't done it yet, you know, audit your team, figure out what their learning style is. It'll make a huge difference in how you communicate. And again, this also applies to your clients. And you can ask your clients that question. How do you prefer to communicate? It's not so much a learning style, but it's kind of on the border of communication. How do you prefer that we communicate? You know, if we have to talk about something complex, what's the best way to, you know, talk about that? You know, you can do that. And same with vendors and anyone else. But it's really important with your team. Absolutely important with your team. So remember, comprehension is the result of effective communication. If you have a problem with guys not hearing you and doing the right thing, it may be a comprehension problem. It may be a communication problem. But at the end of the day, if they're not doing what you're asking them to do, it's your fault. It's a communication problem. But it just may be the way you're communicating, not that you're not communicating enough. So I hope that was helpful. Guys, that's all I got for this episode. I do want to leave you with one last thing. By the time this episode is aired, my new book that I had just written is now available for you to purchase on Amazon, or you can get the ebook version with extra bonuses by clicking the link in the show notes. The new book that I wrote called The Contractor Profit Blueprint: How to Boost Your Profits and Reclaim Your Freedom in 4 Proven Steps is now available. Hopefully it will help you to really start implementing all of the things that I talk about. It's the 4-step process to really help you create the kind of profits in your business that you need, not only to survive, but to be able to implement the systems and processes and hire the team that you need to get your freedom back. So if you haven't picked it up, you can go on Amazon, just search for the Contractor Profit Blueprint. There is an ebook Kindle version on there. But if you want to get the bonuses that I have included with that, I have a 7-day fast start bonus. I have worksheets that are included in the book and some other information. You can go to the link in the show notes or just go to the website, thecontractorprofitblueprint.com, and you can sign up. You can get the ebook and all the bonuses for right now is only $7. You can get all of that for $7. Go there and get that book. And yeah, I mean, I wrote this because I get so many, I work with so many contractors who struggle, and there's so much information. There's really a lot of moving parts to have a successful business, but I've weeded out all of the stuff that's not important and only put in there the 4 main things that you need to work on in your business to increase your profits. And so that's why it's called the Contractor Profit Blueprint. So pick it up. It's links in the show notes. And I'd like to hear back. Give me some feedback on it. Definitely want to hear your thoughts, about the book, about what's in there. And if there's anything else I can ever do for you, please reach out and let me know. Guys, I appreciate you so much. You can find me on the social media platforms. Just search for the Hammer and Grind podcast. And until next time, remember, profit is not a dirty word.